What if you woke up tomorrow and the thing you worked hardest to protect was suddenly illegal to own? Not stolen, not taxed, illegal. That's not a hypothetical. That already happened, right here, in America, to ordinary people who did nothing wrong except trust that their property was their own. And the scariest part? The government didn't even need to break down doors. Most people just handed it over. Here's what actually went down. It's 1933. America is bleeding. The Great Depression has gutted the middle class. Banks are failing by the hundreds. Unemployment is at 25%. People aren't just struggling, they're unraveling. Franklin Roosevelt steps into the White House and faces a choice: let the system collapse entirely or do something radical. He chose radical. On April 5, 1933, he signed Executive Order 6102, and overnight, owning gold became a federal crime. Not for corporations, not for foreign governments, for you, for your neighbor, for the farmer who buried coins under his porch, for the widow who kept her late husband's gold watch in a drawer. Every American was ordered to turn in their gold to the Federal Reserve. In exchange, paper dollars, at a government-set price, no negotiation, no appeal. And here's the detail that should make your stomach drop. The penalty for non-compliance was a $10,000 fine. That's nearly $250,000 in today's money, and up to 10 years in prison. One signature, one night, gone. Now you might be thinking, that was 1933. Different era, different rules. It could never happen today. But what if I told you that the legal framework that made it possible was never fully dismantled? And what if the 5 assets sitting in your portfolio right now are more exposed than gold ever was? Most people think the gold ban ended and the story was over. It wasn't. Yes, in 1974, Gerald Ford signed legislation allowing Americans to own gold again. Headlines celebrated, people cheered. Crisis over, right? Wrong. What almost nobody talks about is what didn't get repealed. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the Trading with the Enemy Act, the legal architecture Roosevelt used in 1933, the Emergency Powers Framework, is still on the books. Every single piece of it. Expanded, actually, over a decade since. Under current U.S. law, during a declared national emergency, the president retains extraordinary authority over financial assets. We're not talking about speculation here. We're talking about statutes, written law, verified by constitutional scholars. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Since 2001, the United States has been in a near-continuous state of declared national emergency. Think about that. The legal trigger that unlocks those powers, it's been pulled, and it hasn't been put away. Now ask yourself a different question. If a government needed to stabilize a collapsing financial system today, not in 1933, but today, what assets would they look at? Gold is already tracked, already taxed, already on the radar. But what about the new stores of value? The things millions of ordinary people have quietly moved their wealth into over the last decade. The assets that governments are only now beginning to fully understand and fear. That's where the real risk lives. And that's exactly what we're about to expose. Because the 5 assets we're going to cover aren't random. Each one follows the same historical pattern that made gold a target in 1933. Each one meets the same 3 criteria governments have always used to justify confiscation. Criteria number 1, the asset holds significant value outside the banking system. Criteria number 2, enough ordinary citizens own it to make targeting it financially worthwhile. Criteria number 3, there is already a legal or regulatory framework being quietly built around it. Sound familiar? It should. Asset number 1, cryptocurrency. Let's start with the obvious one, because most people think decentralization means protection. It doesn't. In 2021, China banned cryptocurrency ownership entirely. Not regulated, banned, overnight. India came within days of doing the same. The EU is building a digital asset registry right now, and the US Treasury has already floated the idea of mandatory reporting for wallets holding over $10,000, the same threshold they use to monitor cash transactions. Here's the pattern. First comes transparency, then comes taxation, then comes control. Sound familiar? Asset number 2, physical cash in large quantities. This one surprises people. Cash feels safe, tangible, but the war on cash is not coming. It's already underway. 11 countries have already implemented restrictions on large cash transactions. In France, it's illegal to pay more than 1,000 euros in cash for certain purchases. In Australia, a $10,000 cash limit is federal law. In the US, civil asset forfeiture laws allow authorities to seize cash without charging you with a crime, and the burden is on you to prove it's legitimate. They don't need to ban cash, they just need to make it suspicious. Asset number 3, retirement accounts. This is the one that keeps financial historians up at night. In 2008, Argentina nationalized $30 billion in private pension funds, overnight, to plug a budget shortfall. In 2010, Hungary did the same. In 2013, Poland seized half of all private pension assets. In the United States, there are currently sitting over $35 trillion in private retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, Roth accounts. That number has been noticed. Asset number 4, precious metals again. Yes, even now. Physical silver and platinum fall outside the 1974 legislation that restored gold ownership rights. And in 2012, the CFTC quietly imposed position limits on precious metals futures. The infrastructure of control was already being tested. Asset number 5 is the one almost no one is talking about, and it may be the most vulnerable of all. The 5th asset is private real estate held outside traditional financing. Land, paid-off property, homes owned free and clear. Hear me out, because this is where history gets truly uncomfortable. In the 1930s, property taxes were weaponized. Counties across America raised rates dramatically during the Depression, knowing full well that cash-strapped owners couldn't pay. When they couldn't pay, the property was seized, legally, cleanly, with paperwork. It happened to black landowners disproportionately. It happened to immigrant families. It happened to the rural poor across the South and Midwest. And the mechanism is still there. Property taxes never went away. The rates are set by governments. The penalties for non-payment are government-controlled. And in an era of exploding municipal debt, cities and counties are watching the value of private land very carefully. But there's something newer, something more sophisticated. In multiple countries right now, there are active legislative proposals for excess equity taxes, a tax not just on your income or your property value, but specifically on the wealth you've built through appreciation. The idea, if your home has gone up in value by $400,000, the government wants a share of that gain even if you haven't sold. Canada explored it. New Zealand nearly passed it. Progressive economists in the U.S. have proposed versions of it in academic papers and congressional testimony. And here's the thread that ties all 5 assets together. Every single one of these, crypto, cash, retirement accounts, precious metals, and real estate equity, is a store of value that exists outside or alongside the traditional banking system. Each one represents wealth that a government in crisis cannot easily print its way around. And here is the most chilling part of all. In 1933, most Americans didn't believe it would happen until the day it did. They thought they were protected. They thought their property was their own. They handed over the gold. So the real question, the one that should keep every investor, every saver, every ordinary person awake tonight, isn't whether governments can do this. It's whether you'll be ready when they decide they have to. Here's what most financial channels won't tell you. The goal isn't to live in fear. The goal is to think like the people who survived 1933, not the ones who panicked and not the ones who did nothing. Because there were people in 1933 who protected themselves, quietly, legally, intelligently. And their strategies translate directly to what's happening right now. Step 1. Diversify across jurisdictions, not just asset classes. The 1933 gold ban applied within U.S. borders. Americans who held assets in Swiss banks or foreign accounts were largely untouched. Today, legal international diversification is more accessible than ever and more important than ever. This isn't tax evasion. This is what every major corporation and ultra-high net worth individual already does as standard practice. Step 2. Understand the reporting landscape before it changes. The window between legal and unreported and legal but heavily monitored is closing on multiple asset classes simultaneously. Crypto reporting requirements are expanding, international account disclosure rules are tightening. Moving before the infrastructure fully closes is a completely different experience than moving after. Step 3. Hold tangible, productive assets. In every historical confiscation crisis, the assets that proved hardest to target shared one characteristic. They were productive. A farm produces food. A productive business generates employment. A rental property houses people. Governments are far less likely, politically and practically, to seize assets that communities depend on. Gold just sat there. That made it easy. Step 4. Know the legal framework in your country. Not to exploit loopholes, but to understand the actual exposure. In the U.S., the IEEPA, the Bank Secrecy Act, and civil forfeiture laws represent a set of tools most citizens have never read. Ignorance of those tools is not protection from them. Step 5, the most important one, build community. The people who fared best in Argentina in 2001, the crisis that inspired one of the original titles that brought you here, were not the wealthiest individuals. They were the ones with strong local networks, barter systems, community bonds, trust. Money is a technology for storing and transferring value. When the technology breaks, and throughout history it always eventually does, what remains is what was always real: skills, relationships, productive land, knowledge. Here is the final thought I want to leave you with. The 1933 gold ban was not an act of malice, it was an act of desperation by a government that had run out of options. The lesson of history is that governments under pressure do what governments under pressure have always done. The question is simply, when the pressure comes again, which side of that equation do you want to be on? The people who knew, or the people who handed over the gold? If this video made you think differently about the assets you hold, share it with one person who needs to hear it. And if you want the full breakdown of the Argentina 2001 survival protocol, the one that actually worked for ordinary families, that video is next. Don't wait for the executive order.